Thank you for being with us this lovely Saturday morning. Cybersecurity levy. Who benefits? There's been a lot of talk about this cybersecurity levy matter in the course of the week, and the Senate had earlier this week said that the newly introduced 0.5% cybersecurity levy on some banking transactions by the federal government was not meant to punish Nigerians, as it has numerous exemptions to protect and relieve ordinary citizens, particularly the poor. But the question, as many Nigerians would say, is who cybersecurity levy ep? So, to tell us if it is epping anybody, we have a panel this morning, and it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Philip Iwe Hoya, Chief Information Security Officer and Data Protection Officer, NPF Microfinance Bank. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We also have a financial analyst, Mr. Yinka Ogunubi. Good morning.
Glad to be here.
Let me start from where you might consider the wrong end of this matter. We have heard, Mr. Ogunubi, we have heard a lot about this week, and it seems that there was an amendment to the law about this year, which not many people seem to have heard about. And the senator was on one of our programs last night, telling us that, yes, it went through due process, there was a public hearing, but did you hear of any public hearing regarding this?
I was in a public hearing.
And you are in the industry. That's your turf.
Okay, so it's a bit, I didn't hear of the public hearing, and I didn't hear because I wasn't paying attention, at that time. And
but should one be paying attention? It should be in our faces, because it's to invite all stakeholders.
Well,
don't you think?
Yeah, yes, but you see, the thing is that the Cybersecurity Act is about so many things. So the ones that seem to prick the interest of everybody right now is that
the levy.
It's a levy.
Yes.
So, but the levy is just one section.
Okay.
It's not even a section. It's just one line in a section. So there's so many other things about the Cybersecurity Act that should unnecessarily pique the interest of all Nigerians. And so if we're talking about the public hearing, that should incorporate everybody. So I don't think at that time people were paying attention. I think this was in November 2023. Probably other things,
they said the amendment was made in 2024.
No, the public hearing was in November 2023.
Okay.
The third reading of the bill was in December.
Okay.
And then by February, the president had signed it. And in fact, when the president signed it, nobody knew. So if you go on Google today, I actually search when did the president sign the amendment to the National Cybersecurity Act, you will not find any media reports about it. So I think, and this is not to put you on the spot, that it's both the issue of Nigerians paying attention and also the media also letting them know what is going on, because if you go on the National Assembly website, it will show there's a schedule there about all the bills they are considering, all the public hearings that are going to have, all the stuff is there. So if the media is not shedding light on that and letting people know that, okay, this is going on, because it's going to be a law, and that law eventually...
I assure you that if it concerns levy, if it concerns Nigerians paying more, they will pay attention. What do you think?
Yeah, you're right. They will pay attention, but like you mentioned, the need for public participation is very key. And I think if that was really put to the public in terms of them aware and participating in the process, I think that would also enhance what the government is trying to pass across, because the issue of cybersecurity is very key, and it poses a huge threat to our national security and even the development of the digital economy. So all those things are very critical.
And Philip, what is your take about what my partner had said to me earlier, that we are leading the charge in having a cybersecurity levy? We are the first country to introduce that.
Or are
so the rest of the world should learn from us this time. But let me confirm with you, are we the first to introduce a cybersecurity levy?
Yeah, based on from when the information came out, I also tried to reach out to some other professionals in other countries. They don't have it directly as cybersecurity levy, but there is a way they carry out that charge, which I think we would have also done a kind of consultation to see how it's been done over there. So when we're implementing ours, we will not be at totally different from what they are doing at some point. But the issue in terms of whether there is a levy directly is not just labeled cybersecurity levy from information we've gathered so far.
Well, Mr. Ogunubi, it's one thing that is curious to me is that nothing about this provision is new. It's almost 10 years old.
Yes, 9 years old.
9 years.
Yeah.
And we're just hearing about it now. Why?
I think it's because of the discrepancies in the bill. There are lots of issues raised by that bill that even the lawmakers themselves knew to be difficult to implement.
Such as?
I'll get into them. And they try to do some of them through the amendment, because the bill was signed May 15, 2015. Okay, at the twilight of the Jonathan administration. The Buhari administration, for whatever reason, decided not to implement that particular section of the bill. You know, and then there was a discrepancy at some point in 2018. The CBN, maybe not the CBN, but they tried to implement it.
Yes.
So there was a circular to all the banks to implement the bill, the act at that time. But that circular quoted the rate as 0.005%, which was not what was in the act. The act just said the rate is 0.005. That's all. Now 0.005 could mean 0.05 kobo. It could mean percent. Probably they saw that that was also an issue, which they corrected in the amendment. So the amendment clearly said 0.005%. You know, the 0.05 and then in bracket 0.5%, because 0.005 mathematically means 0.5%. So
all that was missing in the 2015 provision is the percentage.
No. There were like 20 amendments. It wasn't. It was just one of the amendments. So it wasn't everything. But the issue here goes beyond just that percentage in itself, and I'm just focusing on that levy in itself, because there are issues to it. One of it, for instance, there's already an electronic money transfer levy. All right, you remember the stamp duty conversation? The Finance Act of 2020 amended that, and then there was this controversy around it, and so they amended it, and they changed the stamp duty to electronic money transfer levy, all right, which is the 50 naira you get on whatever. So there's already a tax.
Well, they said that one is for the infrastructure,
whatever it is. They call it electronic money transfer.
That's because
people pay it, so it doesn't.
So people already pay. So people are already paying it. So essentially, what I'm saying is that this is like double taxation, because you're already taxing on money, electronic money transfer, and you're now saying that another electronic money transfer has to be charged. Okay, this cybersecurity, and then there's a provision in that act that talked about it's only businesses in the second schedule, and there are 5 businesses there that they are highlighted: GSM, telcos, internet providers, banks, and insurance companies, and then stock exchange. So the question is, so if you look at that, you say, oh, okay, it doesn't affect me, just those institutions. But then those institutions have transactions.
And you transact business
with them. So essentially, you're saying, okay, it's for businesses, but those businesses have transactions that impact individuals. So
directly.
And then I think the last issue really has to do with the fact that when did the Office of the National Security Advisor become a revenue generating agency where they can collect via the CBN unappropriated funds? So this raises up significant issues. And I think maybe these were the things we're trying to deal with all that time, why they didn't implement it for 9 years.
Was there any cyber threat that may have led to this amendment at this time?
Okay, maybe Philip will speak more to that, but let me say that the threat of cybersecurity is real. So let's not kid with it.
Okay.
According to the to NIBS, National Interbank Settlement System. They've published, so many times the amounts of money, for instance, that the banks have lost. In fact, some of the banks, they put it in their financials. In 2023, for instance, about a few banks, 5 or 6 banks, reported a total loss of about 10 billion naira. Okay, about 90% of attempts to crack certain to hack systems succeeded.
About 90.
About they say 40 something. They got 43,000 something attempt. 41,000 succeeded.
Ouch.
So, and then when you look at it, you realize, and that's just on the transaction side. When you now look at state cybersecurity, there are state agents right now that all they do is just, they can target your infrastructure and then wipe out your money. So the threat of cybersecurity is real. Nobody is saying that it's not important. It is important, and it's the new horizon in terms of cybersecurity. The question is
the process.
Who should pay for it? Because the Nigerian Constitution is very clear. I think Section 14 is very clear that the duty of government, the primary responsibility of government is security. So why you are outsourcing that to me to pay the bills? I think that's the question to be asked.
Yes, Philip. Was there any cyber threat that could have led to this at this time?
Yeah, added to the statistics he has given, the cyber crime industry is the 3rd largest industry in the world. Meaning they are worth over...
Cyber crime
industry. It's the 3rd largest industry in the world. And it's worth billions of dollars. Meaning, like you mentioned, you have the state actors, you have the activists, you have the nation-sponsored attacks. And you saw what is happening in Iran. Also, now what is happening is nations are now attacking nations via the cyberspace. So, and that, like I mentioned, our digital economy is growing on a very fast pace. And issue of cyber threat, if not holistically managed, it can have an impact on the growth of the economy. So if you look at some of the things they introduced when I was reading the amendment in terms of the security, it talked about things around having a national forensic lab. Those are things that we never had, which is important.
My apologies. Also speak to what Mr. Ogunobi just spoke to now, the fact that the law is there. It is the job of the government to implement its own laws, or rather, it's the job of government to implement its own law, whether it's the National Assembly that promulgated the law and then the federal government is aware of it, the executive arm is aware of it or not. It's not the business of the Nigeria. You are government. You have 3 arms. You have your jobs to do and all of those things. So speak to what he talked about now, that who should be paying for it? Should it be the Nigerian paying this cost of this cybersecurity, or it is something that should be borne by the system? Octo, since you also work in a bank, speak to the angle that he brought in, where he said that there is also some form of electronic charge to the Nigerian. So what would necessitate this one?
Okay, like the chart, for example, like the transfer charge most times goes to the payment platforms that are used in carrying out this transaction. Yeah, like you mentioned, the government has a responsibility of providing security for the citizens. I think what they should look at is, based on the threat we are exposed to, what other alternative can we use in addressing this threat without necessarily probably increasing the burdens on the citizen. Like you mentioned, we already have so many multiple tax. So in that case, they have to be like, how do we benchmark and have a balanced scorecard, looking at the threat, looking at the economic situation, such that we're able to provide the needed security needed for our citizen in terms of the transaction, and also not necessarily increasing their burden. So that is where the point of discussion comes in. And like you mentioned, we're having a kind of discussion, a robust public discussion around it within the citizen, the government, the various professional bodies, and this institution to say, okay, how do we achieve this? Okay, even the tax authorities also need to come into place to look at it. This revenue being collected, is it going to the NSA, or should it be the tax that should be responsible? How does it affect the other tax that are already in place, so that there will not be multiplicity? So those things need to really come into place so we can really know how it's fitting. But saying currently what we have is raising a lot of concern and is a point of concern for every citizen. But critically, it needs to be looked at to find a central position on how we can address this issue. But to neglect the fact that the threat we are faced with should not be addressed is...
That's not what is being said here, if memory serves me right. For instance, let me read out some bank charges to you, which you are aware of. As at 2019, and which was, this one was published in 2022. Electronic funds transfer, ATM charges, Naira card charges. You gave me a card, you are charging me for maintaining it. Intra-scheme money transfer, cashless policy, I have to pay for that one as well. You have status inquiry, embassy letter, all kinds of things. I have to pay for the short messages you send to me to tell me my balance, which is your job, and all of those things. Okay,
most times they send you 3 SMSs a month, but they charge you for 10.
Someone was telling me in the course of this week that one day, just one day, he received about 15 text messages of charges.
So that means his account was busy.
I said, anyway.
So they had to send him at every turn what his balance was.
Well, Mr. David Olumuyiwa has since joined us. He's the founder of Digital Tribes Technology. They're a fintech body. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We're talking about this cybersecurity levy. Let me take it with you from a completely different angle. Mr. Ogunbi was just telling us the vulnerability of the system in some cases where bank charges, the vulnerability of Nigerian financial institutions, saying about 90% of attempted hacks were successful. Now, I know, I've heard it said by what they call ethical hackers, that they have pointed to government from time to time that, look, you guys are vulnerable. Who is listening? That's the concern. Now, in your own opinion, or from where you sit as someone in this space, how vulnerable are we, and why do I have to be the one to pay for cybersecurity? For the money that I already give you to do business, that you don't tell me. You're using my money to do business, and I'm not a shareholder in your bank. I could go on and on.
You don't tell him how much profit you're making from using his money, and you want him to pay again because he wants to transfer some little money up and down.
And you charge... Anyway, let me not go on.
So, talking about vulnerability, certainly we are vulnerable.
How vulnerable are we? Do you agree with Mr. Ogunobi?
Absolutely, but I don't have the data. I can't say we're 90% or 80%, but obviously we're vulnerable. I've worked with the banks before. I've also been in fintech. I've also done a lot of things related to doing transactions online. It's very, very obvious that we're vulnerable. Some banks don't just have it yet, whereas some others are very good, at what they do. But a few of the banks are not so, so good. When you do what we call reconnaissance and you want to check how vulnerable they are, maybe as an ethical hacker, you see a lot of loopholes, you see a lot of stuff that are not supposed to be there in an ideal situation, and you know for a fact that if you know what you're doing on the wrong side of the law, you could get away with a few things, within those platforms. But the banks are always innovating, around security. All right, so we may not want to be too hard on them. The cybersecurity space is vulnerable almost everywhere in the world. I mean, I tell people there are two categories of individuals that you can never be totally secured from when it comes to cybersecurity: a genius and a fool. Either of these guys can mess up with your system. No matter how good you think the system is, a fool will come in and do something foolish and, you know, disrupt the whole system. And a very good guy, a genius, can also come in and disrupt the system. I mean, we've seen even the Pentagon being hacked. So what are we talking about? All right. However, I'm surprised that this cybersecurity levy and all of that is focused just on banks. The financial institutions, because it's supposed to be cyber security, not financial infrastructure security. So when you look at the gamut of the cyberspace where we operate as a country now, we are activating infrastructures online. Our elections are going online. Now we do registration and all of that online. Of course, financial services are online, telcos are online, education online. Look at our airport, transportation, we're online. So there is indeed a need for us to secure the cyberspace. So I wonder why we're focused more on the financial sector, which is just a microcosm of the cyberspace.
Well, from what we know, it's not just the banks and other financial institutions. Information available, even in that same cybersecurity law, says that, in the second schedule, it says businesses affected by that provision in section 44 sub 2A refers to GSM service providers and all telcos, internet service providers, banks and other financial institutions, insurance companies, Nigerian Stock Exchange. So maybe they are saying that the bill to take care of that the cybersecurity, perhaps because they think they're the most vulnerable. The question I'm asking is, what is your take on the process that it is the subscriber that has to pay? Because what this is sounding like to me is that it's not just on bank charges that Nigerians are going to pay 0.5%. Every call I make could also be charged 0.5%.
It's not been said yet.
Yep. Potentially.
It's not been said yet.
It's not been said, but that's what the law says.
So this is why I wanted to tie it to all the other areas of the cybersecurity that will be affected by this, that should be affected by this levy. I'm wondering why we have to restrict it to just financial services and bill about 60 million Nigerians with BVN for a service that the government should be responsible for. I've tried to look into how the US, the EU countries are handling cybersecurity funding. I discovered that it's from the government budget. In fact, in the US, it says from the president's budget. That's where they fund their own cybersecurity, stuff from. But here, it looks to me like, a situation where there is hunger in the land, and the mother is turning to the children that she's got to roast them for meal, for sustenance. The government should go about raising their own funds to deal with the situation, not turning to us, to fund their own responsibilities. It shouldn't be my responsibility. So what happens if I get hacked and I get, someone takes my money after paying that levy on that transaction? What happens? Will you bear the responsibility because you're supposed to secure the space? And now my money is being taken. Are you going to pay for that?
Mr. Dada, the focus of this whole matter is on the banks.
Yes.
You can't deny that. And these banks, at the end of every financial year, publish in the newspapers and declare humongous profits.
Absolutely.
So why can't they, from those profits, secure what they need to secure to keep their customers safe?
The truth of the matter is that the banks already have budget for cybersecurity.
But it's not enough.
We can't say because we don't really know what they're doing and how far they've gone down the road.
But they're not achieving much by it.
But if you look at all
from what we have heard, if 90% of hacking attempts succeed.
Yeah, well, that is still debatable. But if you look at the infrastructure that helps us to do all these transactions, the NIPS of this world, the MasterCard, Visa cards of this world, the InterSwitch of this world, and so on and so forth. These guys are invested heavily on cybersecurity, heavily. So I wonder what happens to that when we start paying for another cybersecurity levy, because that is supposed to be taken care of from what we are being charged already. So why are we being levied an extra fee to secure the financial transactions that we're running?
Okay, Mr. Ogunubi, the Tax Reform Committee was set up to harmonize taxes because it was discovered that there were too many taxes.
Yes.
Do you think that this was run by the tax committee before it was brought to us?
Obviously not. Obviously it wasn't. Because what led to this was, like I said, this was first attempted in 2018. For some reason, they didn't implement it. They didn't go ahead. The CBN sent circulars to all banks. 2018, you need to start implementing this. For whatever reason, it wasn't done. Maybe they got a call from above that said, don't do it. So it ended there. So it's not like this. It's not like this the first time. But it's obvious that this wasn't brought through, because 4 days before the CBN issued that circular, the NSA at a conference in Abuja somewhere had made that announcement to say that directive, or I don't know the exact language you use, but something to the extent that the authorities have been asked to start the implementation of that particular provision in the Act. So the CBN, in its circular, the one that we are all fixated on, mentioned that in the first paragraph of that circular. In fact, I think I have the circular here.
That's the 2018 circular?
No, the 2024 circular. Okay. It says, so it referenced the earlier CBN circular and letter to banks dated June 25th, 2018. It referenced that, and October. In fact, there were two circulars, respectively, on compliance with the Cybersecurity Prevent Act. The recent public engagements by the Office of the National Security Advisor on the subject matter also refers. So essentially, the CBN, this is the CBN saying, it is not me. Don't no, it's not. I'm not the one that's doing this.
I'm innocent of all charges.
It's the NSA. And we know the NSA reports to the president. So essentially, what you have there is basically saying that go meet the president, go meet the presidency, and ask them what happened. But it's obvious that there was no, and this is the challenge that we have with our governance. That is, there is no collaboration, going on. There's no synergy in terms of all the different agencies. The fiscal side have to look at this, because this levy is problematic on many, many grounds, not even on the 0.5 or no 0.5. The issue here is you are basically punishing people for using a digital platform that you have a policy itself to push. You have a cashless policy that is, driving people towards electronic payment. Now you are punishing them from using that electronic payment, and so it becomes regressive, because at the end of the day, people will go back to, using checks and cash. So essentially, really, it's about these agencies of government, how are they cooperating and how are they working together. I don't think they are.
Now, Philip, we have a National Information Technology Development Agency or something. NITDA. So if that exists, how does it become the business of the NSA's office to be telling us about cybersecurity levy? What, therefore, is the job of NITDA?
So, like you mentioned, like the NITDA, for example, they cover issue around data protection. Now, all those various agencies of government that deals with things around cybersecurity technology, there has to be a kind of collaboration, so that when there's a synergy, for example, they would have had a thorough thought at this beep, for example, look at it, how does this affect, where is a disconnect, because it's like one agency is doing something, another agency is doing something else, and at the end of the day, there seems to be in silos. But if they are collaborating, for example, all of these things would have been thought of. Then what NIDA is doing, for example, they are just focusing on data protection. Now we have what we call the National Cybersecurity Strategy Policy that was signed by, I think, 2015 or 2018 by the previous administration. Now that framework talked about how we should look at our national cybersecurity architecture in terms of critical infrastructure. Now all of these things would have come together with the framework. Then CBN is also pushing something from the financial sector. They have what we call the risk-based cybersecurity framework for DMB, for OFI, and other PSP. So all of these institutions would have come together to look at all of.
What do all of those mean?
So these are frameworks, these are processes on how they should address cybersecurity related issues.
She's talking about all those codes, the deposit money banks for
DMB, deposit money bank, OFI, other financial institution. That's where you have the like of the microfinance bank, the payment service bank.
Thank you.
So what are they doing? Like you mentioned, the issue around this trade, to look at, okay, what are the things they should put in place within all of those regulatory frameworks? They define things around how they should have fraud system to ensure that all of this issue of risk faced by customers are not there. Then one of the key critical things I also see, like you mentioned, is what happens to the customer. And some area this bill did not really look at is issue around cyber insurance. It's very, very critical, because when there is a loss, who insures the customer's money?
NDIC, what about NDIC? That there's already
NDIC insures for Nigeria Deposit Insurance in terms of when the bank bankrupts, when there's a bankruptcy in the bank. NDIC is already taking about. But for example, when someone's money gets lost as a result of cyber attacks, so something like that would have formed part of what would have been amended in the bill that will help also give some citizens.
So you think that government could actually divert this levy into the insurance? Don't even answer that question.
No, that's not what I'm thinking.
Patrick Sonny sent an email. It says, just draw attention to what currently obtains. The electronic fund transfer charge of 50 naira is for government, while 6 naira 98 kobo per transaction is for telcos for the maintenance of their infrastructure that is provided for such transfers. Is that what you were referring to the other time?
Absolutely.
So they already charged me almost 7 naira.
So per 1,000, if this goes through, we'll be paying 5 naira per 1,000. If this goes through, in addition to all the other charges we were mentioning the other time.
So they will now be getting more than 10 naira.
Absolutely.
For every.
I mean, it's going to be way more than 10 naira.
Bank. This is just for the bank.
Yeah.
The telcos have not come up with their own.
And all of that.
Please don't. Morakinyo on X says, so if I have my money taken through cybercrime from my account, is the bank going to pay me back or the NSI since I paid the levy? That's what you just
exactly where I'm going. So these are some of the things that's currently not captured there.
Okay.
So most aspects.
Festus Akimboyewa says on X, instead of the labor unions threatening to shut down the whole of Nigeria because of cybersecurity levy, they should work with government to find an alternative, because cyber crimes and cyber attacks are on the rise, and the same people rejecting the levy may lose trillions of naira of their hard-earned money to cyber criminals if cybersecurity is not taken seriously. Just a few days ago, UK's Ministry of Defense was breached. You spoke to that earlier. So are there options? Are there alternatives to the process?
For me, I think the government is desperate around raising money, and they're looking at any which way they can raise these funds from. There is no doubt in the fact that there is a need for us to look into the cybersecurity space towards ensuring safety, because it's very crucial. Whether we like it or not, we're all moving to that space and we'll be operating on that space. So the security of that space is very important. However, it shouldn't be my responsibility to pay for every transaction. I mean, that's what this is leading to.
Okay, maybe that question is answered by this other contribution on X, and I think it's also from Festus Akimboyewa, and this is probably going to go to you, Mr. Ogunumi. It says, from the provision of Section 44 sub 3, the contributions to National Cybersecurity Fund is tax exempt and tax deductible. by this provision, the intendment of the law cannot be individuals, but the businesses listed in the second schedule of the Act. The pertinent question is, if individuals are made to pay, how do they aggregate the deductions to take advantage of the tax benefits? Or the businesses will still go ahead to claim the tax benefits after charging individuals?
It's a good question. And so to be honest with you, it's one of the things that they need to come out and clarify. There are lots of inconsistencies within the Act, and they need to, there needs to be an interpretation of it for everybody to know. Yeah. The Act clearly said, and I quote, that the electronic transactions value by the businesses specified in the second schedule of the Act. We know those businesses.
Not transactions. Businesses, not transactions.
No, it's mentioned transactions.
Oh.
It says equivalent to 0.5% of all electronic transactions valued by the business specified in the second schedule. So we know their transactions, but we also know their business. But the question really is, the banks, what do they do with electronic transactions? So you answer that question. How many banks do we have? Maybe like 20? How many electronic, so to say, transactions would they do sufficient to the point where it's, it carries the mass that with the exemptions, they will pay anything. So they need to tell us really clearly that, oh, you know what? They need to come out. Somebody needs to come out from the NSA's office or the people who drafted the law to say, hey, it doesn't affect your deposits. Your deposits are free. But you see, when you begin to look at the exemptions make, talk about salary payments, savings accounts, intra-bank transfers. So when you begin to look at those exceptions, you realize that no, they're not talking businesses here. They're actually talking about individual transactions.
So how will they know
individuals and business transactions in there?
How does that machine or whatever system is put in place know a salary transfer difference?
Those are the operational challenges that you have. Okay, fine. So, Philip will confirm what I'm saying here. Banks usually have this salad. We call it salary administration, where corporates or companies are asked to open salary accounts for their staff and all that. So if you have a salary account with the bank can obviously know that any transaction through those accounts are salaries. But if I'm paying my maid, for instance, all right?
That's a salaried account.
If I'm paying salary, okay, how does the bank know that?
They have to put a code.
Do I have to put a code? Or do I have to go open salary account for her?
Well, Mr. Aluku has this email as well. Says the banks have never accepted responsibilities for any cyber crimes. Have you? Well, don't just my money was moved from my account to a betting account. I have never in my life played any of those. The bank declined responsibility, claiming I must have exposed my details or kept my card carelessly. They were able to trace where the money was moved to, but could not retrieve it. I lost that money till today. So do you take responsibility for cyber crimes?
Okay, so first and foremost, part of what the banks are doing first is
I think before you explain, I think it's a yes or no question first, and then you can explain.
Fine. So why I said this is two-way, depending on who is responsible in terms of how did the attack happen. If it's from the bank's end, the banks take responsibility. But if it's from the customer's end, then it becomes the customer's responsibility. So it's a shared responsibility. Because, for example, if you're not supposed to expose sensitive information, you do. There's no way the bank system will be able to know that the information is being shared. So security on its own is not just one-sided. So while the bank is putting some basic infrastructure in place to secure the transaction, even with that, the attacks can still happen. So when that happens, what happens? So that's why you were asking who takes responsibility. So it's from the
bank will
end.
never take responsibility.
No, if the bank's end from this bank system, the bank takes responsibility. But if it's not from the bank's end, it becomes the customer's responsibility.
Okay, let's begin to coast home. You wanted to...
Yes, Mr. Dada.
Yes.
Is this not capable of further alienating the unbanked?
Absolutely. I mean, why should I take my money to where all manner of deductions will go in and, I'm losing money? It's only in Nigeria you keep money in the bank from January to December without touching it, but it will reduce. It will go down. So you keep 1 million in the bank in January, by December you probably be having 600,000 left due to deductions and what have you. So definitely it would discourage people who would probably have loved to go into cashless system and all of that. Now with this, so no, I can't be paying 5 naira per 1,000, so I'll just keep my money, somewhere, or I would deactivate all online transactions. I have to move into the bank and do my transactions. So it's like we're taking steps backwards from the success that we have recorded in terms of the cashless policies. So I think the government should rethink the policy. They can still raise this money, but not by taxing everybody in sight, for transactions. It's important for us to emphasize that yes, there's a need for us to secure our cyberspace, and this has to be funded one way or the other. But that should not be a burden of the depositors or the bank.
Maybe part of the subsidy money that will start could go to this.
Well,
just a thought.
Mr. Ogunubi, your final thoughts, but I'd like you to speak to the National Cybersecurity Fund in that same section 44. Because essentially what they're saying is that this issue generating concerns is to fund that for the funding of that cybersecurity fund. What alternatives could there be?
Well, I think, like Dada said, it's important to recognize that cybersecurity is real. A lot of people complain today if somebody from China wipes up all your savings or your pension fund, we will blame government for doing nothing. So there's a need for us to secure our cybersecurity, improve the infrastructure, ensure that the banks have a huge backbone to be able to support this. Because look, the banks are spending a lot of money for cybersecurity, a lot. There's no figure on that, but I think conservative estimates put it at somewhere around $200 million a year. Wow. So that's a lot of money that the banks are doing, and you see it every day with your bank app. They are changing this, they are doing that. That's cybersecurity really working. But cybersecurity is more than just bank transactions. It's securing the state itself. It's securing our own infrastructure. It's securing our power systems from being hacked somewhere, in some foreign entity. So we need to look broadly at that issue to say, how can we have a sustainable funding of this? And I think one way to look at it is already look at those who are spending their money. The banks, they're spending a heck of a lot of money on it. So the question is, how can the government come and support them? So that instead of spending that money, because they're doing it individually for their own systems. So can we have a national cybersecurity strategy where they can channel a percentage of that flow into that pool, and then we can use that pool to be able to improve security for everybody so that the banks don't have to spend that much.
Okay. Well, Mr.
Philip.
Yes. The issue is of trust. One of the main issues here is of trust. If you look at the list of deductions that Nigerians already pay, it is a lot. And sometimes you look at your bank balance and you're wondering, who did I give 2 naira 25 kobo to? Who did I transfer 6 naira 84 kobo to? And all of those things. Perhaps it's that what Nigerians have often called secret charging. There is also a problem. Now you're bringing another one. So what communication should be going from who to the Nigerian to let them know that to be able to build and instill trust in the system?
First, it has to start with an awareness on what seeks to be achieved, basically in terms of the funding. Now, there's already a lot of charges. Like you mentioned, there should be an alternative. Even with the alternative, they have to bring like the benefit. What is the cost benefit of, okay, this is what we are using for, this is how to benefit the citizen. And they will see how to bring value to the citizens, one. Then secondly, to also improve the economy in terms of how a lot of people will have trust in the digital system. And what that means, it will also increase financial inclusion. And when that happens, it has an impact in financial transaction. Then the third thing is utilization, properly utilized for the purpose which it should be meant for. Like you mentioned, there's no doubt that there has to be a kind of alternative to how this thing should be funded. Like you talked about, the banks, for example, are doing a lot, but the truth of the matter, some others are not able to do this because of the financial implication. But if we have things like a national SOC, meaning Security Operations Center, National Threat Intelligence Center, where all of these institutions by default, so you are coming in, if you are not plugged into all of this security architecture, you are unable to do financial transaction. What that means is that it will reduce the number of attacks, improve customers' confidence, build trust. And if all of these things are looked at, maybe later and you want to do some other things, customer will not necessarily raise arbitration costs. Why? They've seen over time that they reduce their losses, they've not lost money, and they have confidence in the system and they can trust what the government is doing. And that would be a good long.
Thank you. The long and short of this is that yes, our cyberspace needs attention, and yes, it needs money to get it secure, but who is supposed to pay for it? Should the customers be the ones to pay for it?
The president. Or the president, just asking. That's what...
Thank you very much for coming and sharing your time with us this morning. I mean, we have learned a lot from this discussion. Mr. Yinka Ogunubi, financial analyst, Mr. David Dada, founder, Digital Tribes Technology, and Mr. Philip Iwekoi, Chief Information Security Officer, Data Protection Officer at MPF Microfinance Bank. Thank you all very much for sharing your time with us this morning and agreeing to come and educate us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Sunrise will return in just a moment and we'll be talking about the rains. They are already upon us.